everyone, my name is Hilda Arteaga and I am a community manager of the Cisco community and the host of today's event. So today we are going to have a special event called Meet the Author. In this case, going to be Meet the Authors because we have many authors. The topic from today is CCIE Security and its practical applications in today's network. And we are going to focus this session on Zero Trust. On this special event, you will be able to learn more from the world-class experts who actually, all combined, have over 70 years of security experience. And along this session, you will learn more about the relevance of CCIE security in today's evolving networks and how it is important to implement and talk about Zero Trust. In addition, they will cover some key content of their security book. So for today, we will start the session with an interview to the authors, and where we will get to know more about them, their career path, and their collaborations on different books and publications. And then they will talk about Zero Trust and its importance to becoming a security pro. So I would like to thank Vivek, Aaron, Mason, and Jamie, and welcome them to this session. We are actually very thankful and honored to collaborate with you in this Meet the Authors event. So we have great news for you. We actually have a surprise for all the attendees of this session. We will be giving away 2 copies of the book on this event, and those books are signed up by the authors actually, and you can receive them for free. So how about to win a signed book from these guys, from these experts? That would be great, right? So how can you win? Well, please bear with us, stay with us, and we will be telling you how you can win. And the winners actually will be announced during the session once the experts complete their presentation. All right, so let's start with this special event. And once again, thanks for joining us. Aaron, Vivek, James, and Mason, you are extremely savvy and knowledgeable. And well, we know you not only for being Cisco Press authors, principal engineers, solutions architect, principal architects, and among many other titles you have had across your life. And actually, we will have so many questions that we would like to ask you, and you are just too many as well. And there are so many things we could learn from you. But we would like to know more about your beginning, how actually everything started, because people would like to know how things move on. So my question to all of you will be, and you just can go one by one, and this is the first time we have so many authors in an event, it's just like, how you guys started your career in tech? How did you get into tech?
All right, I can go first just to sort of, because I'm probably the oldest guy here on the page, so I can go first. But for me, it was back in the day, we used mainframes and AS400s, and I was working in a computer lab, and the guys were like, hey, you ought to, kind of check out this connectivity. And it was the first time I'd ever touched a router. And that sort of led to a background in IBM and SNA and that skill set, which was very desirable at Cisco in the late 90s when they were doing a lot of routing of bridge protocols. And like probably like most folks, I had a couple, actually more than a couple, nice people who really took the time to help me understand, and I could ask questions and not feel uncomfortable that I was asking dumb questions on my learning path. And for me, then it just became one of those things where it was sort of like, wow, this is really interesting. What's next? And wow, it's kind of like reading chapters in a book, right? You want to see what the next chapter is. And then about the same time, Cisco released their CCNA, CCNP, CCIE, well, the CCNA and CCNP, the CCIE had already been out. And so that just sort of made me go, well, if I'm already doing all this reading, I might as well get a certification out of it as well. So it was very much an evolution and a process. And I'll kind of conclude my comments with saying that one of the nice things today about technology is nothing's really new. It's more of taking concepts that have probably been around for a while and then either applying them in a new fashion, or so a lot of times if you understand how systems work 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years ago, in some cases, they still work in very similar ways today, although the application is different or the actual embodiment of it is different. But it's once you understand sort of how things work, it's easy to transfer it to future skills.
Thanks, Mason. Anyone would like to answer how did you get into tech?
I can go, we'll go oldest and then youngest. So I was a little different, being a millennial. I actually started in tech in high school, had a bunch of buddies that were taking A+ courses and Net+ courses to learn computers and networking at a base level. And then I was actually lucky enough, growing up in Maryland, that I had a career and technology center that had Cisco Networking Academy. So immediately coming out of high school, I left high school with a lot of certifications. I was A+ and Net+ and CCNA, and I also did Microsoft MCSE. So that was kind of the first step. And then I was the weird path where college dropout and pursued CCIE in lieu of taking college and getting a degree. So I got my first CCIE when I was 19 years old and kind of went from there, deploying technology and growing different certifications to kind of prove my knowledge prior to being able to execute with a lot of jobs.
Wow, that's quite young to get a CCIE certification. How about you, Aaron? You started like this career, or why did you choose this career path? Was that your passion? Was that your major? Was a special opportunity?
I skipped a couple years of school. I went to college early, and in there I actually thought I wanted to be a doctor, and found out I was wrong. I definitely did not, and I was in some computer classes as a hobby and was working in the computer lab, and I got recruited. Let's just say I got recruited by the government to leave college and go make some money instead. And so they were looking for young people that wanted to make money, who were really good at math and really good at computers. And I guess I fit the bill pretty well. And I had a lot of responsibility. Very young. Had a wife. At that point, no children. Although I started the children pretty young as well. And I left college, went to go work for the government doing these things, and quickly got out of that and got really interested in Cisco not long after doing that, and just kept progressing up the ladder from there. It's definitely just been a fun field where you can never ever get bored. I have to agree wholeheartedly with Mason, where you can take the same concepts that I've been doing for way over 20 years, and the concepts don't seem to change. The technologies themselves definitely do change, but the concepts all seem to just be applied in new ways. It's been probably some of the best decisions that I've made, as well as some of the most frustrating at the same time.
Aaron,
All right.
the best question of the day is asking you to play a song for everybody, since you have guitars there.
Yeah, that's okay. We don't want to make anybody's ears bleed on a WebEx. That would be bad.
Well, it could be maybe a tiny one, but they mentioned you have a very nice wall there with all the guitars there. All right, so Vivek, besides the fact, like, how did you start it, like everything in here on tech, and how did you choose that one? Why did you decide to focus more on security?
So yeah, it started for me when I was about 10 years old, got my first PCXT, playing around with MS-DOS and reading the huge manuals that used to come with the computers. I don't know why I started reading those manuals, but it sort of sucked me in, playing around with novel networks and helping my dad's business with networking. And that's how I started learning. And when I hit college, fell in with the 90s cracker, movement sort of a thing. Started learning about how to really break TCP/IP. Mess around with my ISP servers, maybe once in a while in a bank server or something like that. But that's how I got interested in really understanding more about security. And after college, even though I was a business and accounting graduate, I ended up signing up with Cisco Tech. Very few CCIEs back then, where I had my first job in the country back in India. Very, very few CCIEs there. It was difficult to do my first CCIE. We had to actually fly off to Belgium. Belgium was the closest place we could do a CCIE security. So did my CCIE security when I was about 22 years old, and rest, as they say, is history. Slowly grew up learning access control, access filtering, and moving with the times. And as Mason and Aaron said, the core technology remains the same. It's just the application of it and incremental innovation on it is what we got to learn and keep up with. So, yeah, that's how I got into networking and security, just playing around and getting interested in how to break things.
All right, thank you very much. And well, we have learned something about like how you started this career and how did you choose it out. But what about like if you would like? There's a question that I really would like to ask to you. How did you guys meet each other, and how you decided to collaborate together?
Oh, I think I'll probably start there. So I had it's a fun one. So about 15 years ago, I was interviewing for a position that opened up for Cisco in where I happen to live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the interviewer was was telling me about the person I'd be replacing, who happened to be his engineer, and he's telling me how brilliant this person is and how this guy has all these Cisco certifications and that he had 5 CCIEs. And I didn't believe him, and I just said, nobody has 5 CCIEs. It's like I had been telling my family about how the CCIE is this goal to attain someday, and just how revered that certification is, and nobody would have 5 of them. Like, he must be this person had to be mistaken that maybe he had 5 Cisco certifications for sure, but there's no way that this person actually has 5 CCIEs. That person is actually obviously on this call right now, who became my mentor, which is Mason Harris. Right, he became my. I did replace him. He actually took a job closer to his house. I actually took over for him which is closer to where I lived, and he was assigned as my first mentor at Cisco when I got the job here. Right, and just an amazingly brilliant and calm, very opposite of me, calm, very professional, brilliant individual who really does have 5 CCIEs, and just blew me away when I met him in this interview. So that is how I met Mason, and just to this day look up to this man like no other.
Thank you.
Well,
Very kind.
and that's really kind and really nice. And well, Mason, that gives us to the question, like, and many would like to know, like, how come and how long it took you to obtain like 5 CCIEs, and why you decided to have that many CCIE certifications?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. So I get that question actually a lot. So I wanted to be a CCIE like everybody else, right? So, and I set out in 1999. I know I'm dating myself a little bit. I passed the CCNA in December of 98, and I set this little goal for myself. I said I want to be a CCIE by December of 99. Of course, like most people, I didn't really realize how ambitious, or probably overly ambitious, that goal was, to go from CCNA to passing a CCIE in a year. And to be clear, I didn't do it. I passed and I failed the first time I took the exam, and I passed it in April of 2000. But the question about why multiple CCIEs, well, at the time, I passed the route switch first, and as I alluded to earlier, my background was Unix and SNA. So the Cisco back in the day had a CCIE that was focused on SNA, right? And I just said on a whim, I scheduled it. I'm here in Raleigh, so I didn't have to travel for the lab and all that stuff. I passed the written. I thought it was pretty easy, because it's really geared for more of a network person who's new to SNA versus an SNA person who's new to networking. And I took the exam and passed it. I thought it was actually pretty easy. And people say, what's the easiest CCIE? That one was easiest because most SNA people aren't really strong in networking. And then at the time, I was working with service providers and doing a lot of MPLS work, and I was like, well, Cisco's got this certification for, basically back then it was called Communications and Services, where you learn MPLS and you do a lot of stuff, and kind of led to one thing to another, because I was like, if I'm going to learn this stuff, it's like in college or university, it's like if you're going to study for a test, And what's the best way to know if you really learn the material or not is you go take the test, right? And so for me, that was part of the reasoning behind it. In fairness, Cisco pays a bonus, a little bit of a cash bonus when you would pass CCIE, so that had probably a little something to do with it. But it's something that I'm very proud of, more proud than like college degrees or things like that, because this was a lot of work and a lot of experience, and it kind of got me exposed to a lot of different areas, not just route switch, but I did the security, which was a lot of firewall and sort of radius TACAX type stuff, AAA type stuff, and the communication services. MPLS today still continues to be a big part of what we do and part of, you know, the way the world works today. So that was very, very relevant. So a couple of my CCIEs have been retired, the SNA one and the ISP dial, which was all about modems and DSL and ISDN and technologies that really aren't quite frankly used that much. So for me, it was really more of just validation of the study. And then I was telling the guys earlier today, I still recertify. It's important to me to still kind of be an active hands-on guy, even 20 years later. A lot of people at their CCIE certs expire that are my age, or they go into emeritus where you just kind of, you know, can wear the badge or the hat or whatever. But I do think that there's tremendous value in going through the program and learning and then validating that learning. So that's just kind of, people ask me why, and that's the main reason why. You know, most of those were done before I had kids. So for all you parents out there on the call, you know how much time kids take. So most of those CCIEs were done before I had kids. So now my kids are, you know, getting ready to head off to college. So to show you how long ago it was.
I love that, Mason, because I joke with everybody about CCIE journey and doing 3 of them. I kind of the same way, where I almost just wanted to do it to prove knowledge, but with no wife, no kids, 2 attempts in 3 months. The second one I went for, I had a wife and a child. It took 4 attempts in 12 months. And the real reason is both attempts took about 10,000 hours of study and lab time. And it's how you spread it out and how you kind of map out your own journey. And now after going through 3, I kind of make the statement that I could do as many as I wanted to. I just need to take and set aside, you know, 10,000 hours or whatever the equivalent to 3 months straight is, and be able to dedicate to that, to the education and to the practice. So it's pretty cool though.
Yeah, and I'll just add to what Jamie said. You know, people ask me all the time, like, how much time did you put into it? And I always say, you know, the amount of time you put in on the keyboard. Now, I know now people do a lot of virtual studies and stuff like that, but back in the old days, I actually bought physical routers and had them in my house. I bought them on eBay, and so I made an investment, a couple $1,000s in a bunch of used routers, the old 2500s, for those of you who've been around for a while, and I had them in my house. But every day it was committed to, so I would go work at Cisco during the day, and then and I would spend from whatever 6 p.m. to probably 11 o'clock midnight every night, including weekends, working out problems and things like that. So I always tell people, you know, for CCIE, it's analogous to how much time you put in on the keyboard. Like, you can't read a book and become a CCIE. At least I don't think you can. You know, you actually have to experience it, do it, understand the debugs, understand what it looks like when it's working, not working, and all that. And that piece of it, to me, is what makes it such an interesting challenge.
One other thing I'll add to Mason, one of the things I always found and got a lot of questions about on Journey was I actually found it easier to do the CCIE program without 10 years of experience. Why? Because a lot of folks I've worked with on their study plans and helping them, you get into industry and you start working with customers. And you know, one example might be BGP. When you learn BGP for customer implementation, there's 3 or 4 methods that are best practices that everyone uses. You don't learn it from there's 15 different ways that you can achieve one scenario. And so it actually is a little bit easier when you take that holistic approach at looking at topics and protocols and how they work from a standards point of view, how they're implemented in the devices, and then how you can achieve those different configurations without a prior knowledge or a prior hard set way of saying, hey, I should never configure it that way because, here's the problems in production if I do it. The CCIE wants to test that thorough knowledge of how those principles apply, which I always found interesting because they say 10 years of experience, sometimes it's easier with less.
Yeah, I work a lot with TAC engineers, obviously coming from a TAC background. And what I've seen over the years is TAC engineers score the least in the section that they support as, their job, right? So if TAC engineers supported ICE day in and day out, they will actually score the least in the identity and management section because they overthink it. So CCIE exam is different. You're taking an exam, you're doing it to pass and answer the questions versus supporting or working in production on a particular technology, right? So I agree with Jamie there.
Yeah, Vivek, you're exactly right. We've seen, I think we may be thinking of the exact same TAC engineers that we've both worked with that have failed those sections in the exams. Yeah, and it is that case. They think they know the product so in depth, so well in those products that they are completely overthinking some of those sections. And it is a matter of necessarily the exams are geared to test if you understand the technologies, and the people who work in TAC, they understand them from a break fix, and they're not thinking about them from a do you understand this from a design and implement standpoint, right? And ultimately, when you're designing a lab or you're designing an exam like this, you're trying to design it from a design and implement, or at least nowadays, you're thinking of designing this exam from a can you take this product, can you put it into a customer environment, set it up to make it work in a way that shows that you understand how the protocols work, right? The protocols work, how the products interact, that you understand how to deploy this successfully. And a TAC engineer, more often than not, just understands how to fix the product, not necessarily how all the protocols are supposed to work or how the product is supposed to interact with other products from a design perspective, if that makes any sense.
It makes any sense. So I have just one last question, and that is just like when you guys were preparing these publications, what were the challenges you find, or which topic you find more interesting? I'm talking about the two books.
That's going to be Aaron and Vivek because they were the masterminds behind this crazy encyclopedia that was created for this.
So let me begin by saying this began when Aaron and I were spending a week in San Jose, basically creating the CCIE Security blueprint, a few years ago. And we walked out on a Friday evening, and we were driving to a restaurant for dinner, and we thought about this. I said, this blueprint is a beast. There isn't a single study material that can cover the entire blueprint. So if we were still pursuing our CCIs, if we were CCI candidates looking to learn about this exam and looking to pass this exam, we won't have a single resource, and we may not even have resources for half the stuff except user guides, which everybody knows is way too much, right? So that's when we came up with the idea of writing this book, and we started creating the table of content and what it would look like. We realized that practically a large single book that covers the whole thing, a Bible of CCIE security, cannot be bound, right? It would have to be hardbound. So no publisher would really agree to publish a single book. So then we had to divide it into two books. And we looked at it. Each of them had 10 chapters, each chapter about 30 to 40 pages. So we're looking at 800 to 1,000 pages, and we both couldn't do it. So we wanted to bring in two more people we trusted, people who had been through the journey of writing books, had been CCIs, were known in their industry, right? People would know that it's coming from reputable people who've gone through what they are going to go through. Then it took a while to convince Cisco Press to publish two books, because it's not easy to convince Cisco Press to publish two books. It took us a year to get them to approve the books.
And originally we actually proposed this as a certification guide, right? And they came back to us and said, no, we don't want it to be a certification guide. We'd rather it be the professional development series. And Vivek and I both pushed back on that at first and said, no, we really want it to be the certification guide. And they said, I don't even remember the argument that came back, but it went back and forth for a while on that also. Eventually, we just said, fine, we'll publish it as the professional development series. We just, people need this guide. Let's get it out. And it was a long process, right? So keep going, Vivek. But yeah, it was less than fun.
It took us 2.5 years to get these books out. And these are 2.5 years of our professional personal lives across medical problems, across other problems, right? And I remember working, I remember there was a particular deadline and I had to finish a chapter. I essentially ended up writing 30 hours straight from Friday evening to Sunday morning, 3 o'clock, with very little sleep, a lot of caffeine. Don't ask me what all was on my desk at that time. Probably I don't want that recorded. A lot of loud music to drown out every other noise. And then I finished at 3 in the morning, Monday morning, and I took a flight 6 o'clock for my business trip. So it does require a lot of effort to keep the timelines because the book can get pushed out and out and out more. Personally, I think the most difficult chapter for me was Volume 1's first chapter because one, that is the opening chapter. That's pretty much what everybody reads when they pick up the book, the first thing. And it was more abstract than technology, right? Writing actual technology chapters on products and technology is easier than writing about abstracts, about security policies, about what really network security is, and all the fun standards. So personally, I think that was the most challenging chapter, and I wanted it to be something that was memorable and easy and distill all these subject topics to a much simpler read, really. So let me actually continue with this slide here and say how the book is divided. So if you haven't really picked up these two books, we divided the books into various parts. The first volume was divided into 3 parts roughly. The first one was infrastructure security. So what really is network security? What are the standards that govern our industry? What your customers and our customers really want, and why do they want security? I mean, what's the real need for security? So it delves a little bit into history of internet and how it came up. Then we move to actually securing the infrastructure, what we call the network, or the devices on which the networks run. And then we end with wireless security in the first part. The second part is more about access filtering. So we want to talk about firewalls, next-gen firewalls, IPS, IDS. So we focus there on the firewall sections. Finally, the third part, we wanted to end with content security, right? That is where you go deeper into security and start looking at what content is really flowing across your wire, the web traffics, the email traffics. We start talking about WSAs and ESAs here. We talk about AMP. AMP could have fit in basically the second part and the third part also, but makes more sense to talk about AMP in terms of content and also tie it back to how AMP can work on the firewalls. So combined, these 3 parts cover about 50 to 60% of your CCIE content. Probably less, around 50% of the CCIE content. So we wanted to give about 50% of content into each volume. And that's how we divided the first volume. Can you move the slide forward, please? The second volume, we divided into 4 parts. The first part covers 25% of your CCIE blueprint. Probably the most important part of the CCIE blueprint is the access control part. So we delve there into 5 chapters roughly, talk about what access control is, various protocols in play, the various products, ICE, and how does ICE really enforce and does all its functions, the main functions like authentication, authorization, accounting, profiling, posture, guest access, BYOD, TrustSec, all of that came into it. Once you did that, and this book is sort of sequential. You got to do the first part and then go to the second part, because second part talks about sharing the context. So the first part talks about building the context within ICE, And the second part talks about sharing the context. That's where PX Grid and various other forms of sharing the context come into the picture. And then it ties you back into the first volume on how do you really take context from ICE and put it into Next-Gen Firewall and WSAs and all the other products that are going to come up in the CCIE lab, right? Then finally, we veer off the whole access control and context sharing and get into encryption, VPN, tunnels, remote access site to site, all the key VPN technologies that you're going to be tested on. And finally, we end with virtualization. Now, this is a small part of the blueprint. It wants to make sure you know how we play in the virtualized world, right? In the context of virtualization that we're seeing everywhere with VMware and Hyper-V, etc., how does Cisco Security really play with it? How, primarily talking about how can we virtualize ASAs and FTDs and run all of that, which you should be very familiar with because your CCIE lab has most of the virtual stuff. Doesn't really have too many hardwares nowadays. So these are the two volumes, barely divided. I know it went really fast. The content is much deeper than that, but that's how we divided the book up. Now, before we go further into zero trust, a lot of the reason we selected zero trust as a topic today was we see this question a lot in our interactions in our online forums. Is CCIE truly worth it anymore, right? And it's not a new question, it's an age-old question. I think I started hearing this question around the time CCIE crossed 25,000 number. Before that, nobody really asked that question enough. But every time, since we've crossed the 25,000, 30,000 CCIE number, this question comes up a lot. Is CCIE really relevant? So we wanted to pick zero trust as a topic to talk about today because that is the most recent and most relevant example of the technologies that the CIOs and CEOs and the boards of various companies are talking about, are moving towards. Two things. One, cybersecurity security is significant enough that board members of companies are talking about it. So think on that for a second. It is a big enough topic where board members are talking about it. It's a big enough topic where a breach can have a CEO step down. It's a big enough topic where CXOs step down like CIOs and CISOs. In countries like or regions like Europe, a cybersecurity breach could mean millions and billions of dollars in fine for a company, right? So cybersecurity is very, very important, and zero trust is a very, very key component of the security needs of today's market. And CCIE Security prepares you for it, right? If you go through, for example, just the second volume, the half of second volume, the first phase part and second part, you will know a lot about zero trust, right? If you go through volume 1, part 1, you'll know a lot about why security is needed. So CCIE Security is frankly more relevant and more valuable today than it has ever been. Because when I did my CCIE about 12, 13 years ago, the content was much less and much simpler. But just the width of the content today in CCIE Security should tell you that cybersecurity is probably the most important topic, and CCIE Security is the best value for your time and money as far as the certification goes, right? So I'm going to pause there, hand over to Jamie and Aaron to talk about what zero trust is really.
Thanks, Vivek. Yeah, and some of the questions coming in were more about the practicality. One thing I will state is that was some of the hardest parts about writing these books is what a topic like VPN, for example, there's 800-page books just on that topic. So how do we balance the expertise required to understand a topic or any one of these topics with the appropriate levels of examples? So, to the gentleman's question that was asking about, are these some concrete examples? A lot of times what we did was try to pick the best example that we could help articulate the primary concepts and then be able to use those to teach, the 10 or 15 different options within some of the configuration examples. Aaron wanted to write 800 pages just on ICE by itself. So we had to really balance the expertise required for this book versus someone that just wants to know ICE. So jumping in here, one of the kind of building on what Vivek was talking about with CCIE security in the real world with this concept around zero trust, the first thing that you kind of need to be level set on is really this market transition that we're seeing with zero trust, and the differences between network security that we would build 10, 15 years ago to some of the approaches around zero trust that organizations are taking today. And then from the big things to kind of take away from that is enabling policy-based controls for every access except in a corporate environment, and that extends beyond the corporate environment. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But realistically, it's this never trust, always verify approach. I should never see traffic on the wire or coming into an application that I haven't first verified the identity of the user, the identity of the address of the device that user is coming in on, and then most likely the connection, so the application trust and the workloads behind protecting that application. This comes with some challenges, but the outcomes that customers are trying to take or achieve, like preventing risk, gaining visibility, and reducing attack surface, these are big things. Like, one of my biggest challenges is every time I read a news article that has ransomware propagating from device to device, this is a use case that Zero Trust hopes to address. And in some cases, that CCIE that taught you how to apply things like downloadable ACLs or static ACLs should immediately help you understand that, hey, I can actually apply some basic permissions associated with east-west campus segmentation without having to do a ton of work or spending a ton of money to get there. That's one of the, I would say, best skills that I learned from all the CCIEs, was trying to come up with creative ways to utilize the technology to apply it to different use cases and outcomes. And you'll see with Zero Trust, there's no exception to that rule. The biggest probably difference between what you see with the CCIE Security and Cisco's formal go-to-market around Zero Trust is really we've tried to simplify this, because Zero Trust at a high level is ubiquitous least privilege access, meaning I need to apply least privilege policy to every traffic use case across my entire organization. Now that by itself is kind of difficult to swallow when you think about all the steps you have to take to get from where an organization is at today to actually achieving that vision of least privilege access everywhere. And so at Cisco, we really tried to focus it so that we can bring quick outcomes and be able to apply some of the main outcomes via these primary technologies. So, like, simplistically, when I think about one of the biggest threats, which is passwords within industry, securing the workforce with Duo and enabling multi-factor authentication and helping with users accessing applications based on user and device trust is a huge leap for a lot of organizations. Securing the workplace with SD access, while it says SD access and we focus on that concept behind software-defined access, ICE really is that policy engine behind the SD access, or that software-defined access solution. And that really gives us the capabilities and the knowledge directly taken from CCIE to be able to apply east-west campus segmentation, trust that holistically from campus up to devices. Little things like being able to extend that into the firewall with PX Grid, whether it's ASA or FTD. You'll see that like throughout the book, you'll see that in some of the sections. All of those technical concepts in there all apply to securing the workplace itself. And finally, from a workload point of view, while the primary solution here is tetration, there's also a lot of integration that comes with the firewall, that comes with the campus network, and then it also comes with things like understanding basic segmentation design and firewalling policy. And the difference between having to write a stateless ACL and a stateful ACL. So while, the marketing concepts are super broad and probably go, well, CCIE very deep, zero trust is a broad construct. In reality, to execute and implement zero trust, a lot of that blueprint knowledge is going to apply to these three areas holistically. Any comments from Aaron or someone else that I'm sure has an opinion on this as well?
So there's someone talked about zero trust frameworks in the Q&A panel. So to understand, like, this is what you're seeing on the slide right here is Cisco's. Someone once asked me for a 5-second elevator pitch on zero trust. I don't do 5-second anythings. But like this is what Cisco would say is their first line for Cisco zero trust, right? Which is a first level offering. Zero trust in and of itself, and as a framework, needs to be very in depth, right? So, and as you heard from Jamie, it took way more than 5 seconds to actually go through even what he was describing here, right? So there is no SD access without ICE, as you heard from Jamie. So when you're thinking about the CCIE security and you think about what are we describing in CCIE security, there's so much in there around ICE. You heard from Vivek that a huge portion of the CCIE security is around the access control and in configuring ICE and configuring the policies. So when you see that secure the workplace with SD access and you see that center section, that is a massive piece of the CCIE security exam. It is a massive thing that we see with customers every day. And in the last, I'm just going to say the last year and a half, I must have interviewed probably 300 to 400 different customers around this type of topic, around what their needs are around zero trust. And out of the couple hundred customers, the topic that comes up around securing the workplace is huge. Even the ones that think they don't have this need, have this need. And even today with the COVID need, it still ends up being huge. People are like, oh, well, no one's going into the office. And then you start talking to them about their business and what their business really is. And like, oh, wow, well, we really do still have people that are in distribution centers. We really do have these systems that are still in our plants. We really still do have a workplace, even though we still have a lot of our workforce that's working from home right now. We still do have businesses that are being run that still have devices on them, and we still really do have this zero trust need in the workplace itself, right? So it is a very important piece of the zero trust puzzle that is there. And the ultimate thing to remember about zero trust, and as we get through this, is it's all about protecting access to your data. It tries to flip the story around and say, it's not just all about threats, right? And it's not a replacement for threat defense. That's the other thing to understand. But it's not all about, right, just thinking about threat defense. It's about protecting the data and understanding what the routes to that data are, and that it's not always the human that is accessing the data, right? And that's where that workplace is so important.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. And I do want to kind of go a couple steps into this a little bit more too. One of the things that I found, because I was on the working group with Aaron and a few others internal to Cisco, was how we convey these steps and the context associated with creating zero trust end-to-end for customers. And so this was actually 3 terms that me and my boss, Jamie Harry, who's another Cisco Press author, came up with around the consistent steps, no matter whether I'm doing it for a workplace, workforce, or workload. And so you'll see this consistent methodology, as I like to call it, for achieving zero trust. And it starts with establishing trust, where we can do things like understanding user device identity, device posture, vulnerabilities, the app and workload, service and trust, and then threat, which Aaron brought up. From there, the thing that's not said on this slide that's important is being able to pivot from visibility to policy. So really getting those things or understanding all that context prior to getting into enforcing trust-based access is super huge. And then from here, I can start to create and maintain trust-based access. And that's Could be microparameters, it could be microsegmentation, it could be in the campus, branch, data center, public cloud, access to SaaS applications. And then the final thing that's important to this, where it gets super technical, is how do I apply some form of continuous trust verification ubiquitously across different use cases? How I deal with something like change of authorization within a radius control plane is different than how I would deal with it with SAML authentication. How I might deal with it if I'm integrating with a proxy or directly to an application. So all these things come into play on how we create policy, maintain policy. And while it's a few words on a slide to articulate it, when you get into the technical nitty-gritty, you actually have a lot of constructs there and a need for that protocol knowledge and CCIE level knowledge to actually apply these things successfully. Now, when I say device trust, one of the things that I kind of hate is there's this idea of what trust means. There are some basic principles out there, and I do love this. I didn't create this content, but one of the things that actually resonates in my mind is this concept of you must be this tall to ride this ride. So everyone's been to a fair or carnival or somewhere else. And realistically, when we think about policy, many organizations are going to define how tall their users must be, or in this case, device trust must be to access different applications, networks, devices, etc. And so just remember that all that context and that policy can be up to the organization and how we apply it. The other thing that's really, really important with zero trust is being able to have this concept of having a policy that I don't have to make ACL changes 3,000 times a day to achieve least privilege. And so one of the most important things here is when you're looking at concepts like TrustSec and dynamic access list and dynamic access groups and how I do or modify the data plane and control plane to change policy. Zero trust, one of the most important concepts is how do I keep this up to date? And if I have to make an ACL change every time something changes in an organization, it just is not going to work. So just keep this in mind. I find a lot of organizations that are thinking about zero trust, everyone wants it. This is a concept that's not new, and I'm going to let Aaron talk about that in a little bit. Everyone wants it, but they don't see some of these technical hurdles that have to be solved to get there. And the big one is operationally focusing on those changes to policy. Now, I talked about those 3 W's. I think the biggest thing I wanted you to take away is the major concepts here. So when we're talking about Duo in the workforce, it's about allowing trusted users on trusted devices into applications. And this could be SaaS applications, it could be private applications, anything in between. When we're talking about workloads, and remember that a construct of dynamic ACLs, the hardest part of the process is actually discovering policy. And that's one of the reasons why tetration is one of the primary technologies there, because it can automatically discover the independencies and dependencies between applications, generate those policies, and as an operator, I can start to actually validate or audit the policy prior to enforcing it. And then long term, I can continually automate and orchestrate policy changes that occur when applications changes, upgrade, etc. The last one that's kind of important is workplace. And for those of you that haven't gone into detail, there's plenty of live content out there to describe some of the innovations in this space. But the key thing is building a lot of those principles that we talk about with ICE and access control as a part of CCIE, and doing them in greater and better ways over time. So, for example, we have within DNA Center, which is the controller and orchestration tool for enterprise networks, we're able to use a new tool called Endpoint Analytics to classify and help profile all those custom profiles you have to learn how to do within CCIE, start to be automated for organizations. From there, we can actually classify and look at that traffic and the dependencies between devices, and then finally actually deploy it out to ICE as a SGACL matrix. And so this workflow that I'm showing you is really key to actually getting from open, I can talk to anything on a network, so soft, chewy middle, to a least privileged network in the workplace. Now, I know we don't have a huge amount of time, Aaron, but at least we can give you some time to rant about marketing, because that's probably the biggest challenge with Zero Trust today.
Well, so we don't have enough time for me to go into my full rant, but anyone who's ever actually ever heard me speak about this in public, I mean, there's been a huge history in Zero Trust, and you all will get a copy of the slides, and so I included this, here from some of my Zero Trust talks. It's just a generalized timeline around Zero Trust and Zero Trust access. It all started, it was actually December of 2003 when Cisco hosted the first forum in Europe with CISOs, which eventually got named the Jericho Forum. And ultimately what we were trying to solve back then was this concept of deperimeterization that we all know really, really well, which is that our users and our data is moving out of our perimeters, right? And that has really shifted a long way. The term Zero Trust didn't come out until 2010 when it was coined by John Kindervad, who was an analyst at Forrester, which is an analyst company. And that's something that really caught on. People love the term. Today, it's really just a generalized term that everybody has kind of accepted, kind of like just NAC has become a term that everyone has accepted. And now finally NIST, and I know Jamie spends a lot of time in the NIST standards. NIST has finally has standardized on this as well with the 800-207 standard. I've spent a lot of time helping NIST with that standard and really trying to help them with some of the terminology, some of the things that were missed in it. A lot of folks did as well. It was definitely not just me. I mean, there were hundreds and hundreds of people helping with this. And you'll also hear this term called SASE, which is what, the term SASE is a Secure Access Services Edge, which you'll hear a lot right now. And especially with so many people working from home and so many resources being out in the cloud, you'll hear a lot about that. You can Google it. But the funny thing is, and if you advance to the next slide, the thing you'll hear me rant about is the term Zero Trust is such a hot term right now that just every company out there just wants to try and tell you that they solve Zero Trust. And this is where the rant comes in. And it's just not true. Cisco's marketing is going to tell you this stuff, and it's just not true. I mean, all the marketing teams, and their job is to try and tell the world that their product, whatever their product is, will solve whatever problem it is that your company wants to spend money on, right? And Jamie's smiling because he's even heard me get into arguments internally with marketing people at Cisco who just tell me that if I don't believe in our marketing message, I'm working at the wrong company then. But I mean, it's just the marketing people's jobs are to get companies to spend money on their company's product, right? And so they're going to say, our product solves this problem that you're willing to spend dollars on, whether it's true or not. And the real answer is no product magically solves any problem. Not Cisco's products, not anyone's products, right? And the ultimate goal is to try and get towards a Zero Trust architecture, right, that tries to solve the overall goals of Zero Trust, but no product anywhere actually provides true Zero Trust.
Yeah,
right?
It's definitely got to be that, end-to-end architecture to be, by definition, following the stuff. Now, my favorite here is just the fact that we had a little bit of help with NIST, and NIST actually gives us something to point back to around what that really means. Like, well, Aaron, what does policy enforcement point, and why can't a single tool do all of this for me? And how come I can't get ubiquitous least privilege with just one product?
Right. And that's exactly right. And it is a decent architecture, and it's pretty good. And it does try to cover the gambit, but it does miss. And in the initial draft, it really missed a few things, including the network, which was kind of funny. But the final draft the final publication is actually pretty good. They did correct a lot of the things that were missing in the initial draft, and it is a good standard to go read if you're into reading standards or you just need to go to sleep. And I think we're based on time. We need to keep going, Jamie.
Thank you very much, guys.
All right.
And due to the time, and you guys have covered most of the questions actually on the live Q&A. We're just going to move forward to you have a look to these extra resources just right there, and we are going to move to the giveaway to the book. So next slide, please. So we have a checkup among these audience. This is made up randomly by random decision. So the winners from today's books, we have 2 signed books of the volume 1. It's going to be Dirk Melvin and Jonathan Fargo. So Dirk Melvin and Jonathan Fargo, both of you guys have been selected as the winners of these books. So we are going to contact you directly from Cisco Community just on the email that you used to register for this event. If you want us to contact through another email, please just let us know, okay? So congratulations, guys. And all what I want to say is just thank you very much to Aaron, to Jamie, to Vivek, and to Mason, because you guys have been sharing a lot. It sounds very easy, everything that you just mentioned, but the truth is that all of you combined has over 70 years of experience in security, and everything that you just mentioned is just amazing. And you guys know a lot, and we truly appreciate the fact that you have been with us on this event. And also for the audience, well, we would like to please ask you to fill up a survey, and let us know how we are doing in these events. What would you like to see? What kind of topics? And when hopefully we have a second session with them, because they have a second volume of their books, so they can cover the rest of the things that they wanted to cover. So I want to thank all of you, and I wish you guys have a wonderful and a great time. And I don't know if you guys want to close up with something.
Actually, thank you, Hilda, for putting up with us and trying to get us on our schedules and putting all of this together. I know it hasn't been easy for you either to arrange all of this, especially with the 4 of us.
It is great. It's a pleasure, and it's an honor. And thank you all the audience for making this possible. And congratulations to the winners again. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. And I wish all of you guys have a great day. And I'm going to start closing this session. Thank you, and see you in the next Media Authors event. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.